Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by Ndis Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Min, and I'm your host from Ndis Property Australia. And this is the SDA Housing Podcast that shares plans, highlights, guides, and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing Ndis world. Today, we have a special guest speaker, Jessica Dale from The Right Fit in Melbourne. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, Min. How are you?
Good, thank you. It's so great to have a new guest speaker on the show, and we're always open to forging new bridges with new people in the Ndis industry to get their feedback and understanding as to what's happening on there and on the ground. So, Jessica, tell me more about The Right Fit and who you are and what this is all about, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Jessica. I have been working in the NDIS space for, I'm going to say 6.5 years now, particularly in the complex hospital discharge space where, a lot of times participants are looking for housing and SIL supports. And in that time, I found a really big gap in the market, and that's around, care teams having a dedicated resource or person that can really search for suitable housing and SIL options that aren't going to completely chew up the support coordination budget, but also find, really great providers who are meeting or exceeding standards in terms of their practice. So therefore, The Right Fit was born, and essentially it's a bridging housing brokerage service for people on the NDIS.
Wow. So there's a bit of a gap out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the gap in this space, what are you trying to or aim to address here for The Right Fit as a business?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I've been noticing, in the market is participants rushing or being rushed into housing and support agreements or situations when there hasn't been someone that's actually just been dedicated to overseeing exactly how that's going to work, mitigating all the risk and making sure that that person really is suitable for that home and for that support service. So the gap that we're trying to target is essentially housing and living supports that are breaking down. So ideally, you want a participant to be suited to the right home and the right support service. But as a provider, you also want to have a participant stay in your service and receive your support for as long as possible. And you want it to be effective and you want it to, remain consistent. So essentially, The Right Fit is ensuring that when we find a match for a participant and for a provider, that participant is going to stay there long term and there's longevity in the relationship between provider and participant.
Wow, that's awesome. I think your business is a unique business model. I mean, I haven't come across anyone who's out there finding they're normally the SIL provider who get the property first and find the participant tenant second, whereas you're doing it reverse engineer. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that's essentially what it is. It's reverse engineering support coordination.
And how do other support coordinators and providers feel about this?
To be honest, I think it's great. We've set our business up so that it actually doesn't cost the NDIS participant anything to engage in our service. It's free. So for support coordinators, I think it's always really great for them when they reach out to us. They know that it's not going to cut into their hours and their support coordination budget. We're essentially just an additional helping hand when it comes to sourcing SIL and SDA options.
Gotcha. So free means it's free, but at some point someone has to pay something for your service. Who is that client to you? Yeah, who is that?
Sure. So the fee comes from the provider. The providers come to us with their vacancies, but our catch is that we actually don't charge anything until a participant has been placed in that home and is settled and, found suitable. So there's no ongoing subscription fees, which a lot of other sort of client finding services have. So really there's no risk to the provider in engaging with us and sharing their vacancies with us. If anything, it's a huge help to us because we've got participants that need homes and they need support. So essentially, if we have someone that we go, actually, your vacancy is perfect, would you like to have a meet and greet? Then we sort of go from there.
That's awesome. So take us through the whole process from start to finish, the initial steps, the onboarding to the house thing, please.
Absolutely. So essentially, we're always open to connecting with providers at any point. If you're finding that you've got particular vacancies that have been really challenging for you to fill, please reach out at any time. But from a participant's perspective, we might get contact from a support coordinator or a hospital discharge planner or a social worker from the hospital who's urgently looking for SIL and SDA. What I'll do is I'll request some information around that participant's funding. What are they approved for? What do they actually need? Because sometimes those two things do not match up. And then obviously have a chat with the participant or their nominee really around their support preferences, around their living preferences, because I think that is the key, is meeting those checkboxes are just as important as meeting the funding checkboxes to make sure that at the end of the day that participant is happy and they feel that they're heard, because their voice is paramount in this. So once we have that information, we then provide a de-identified profile to the provider, and that provider would then say, yep, that's certainly someone that we'd like to meet with and see whether they'd be a good fit for our company or our home. We do a meet and greet, and from there, the participant would then decide whether they wanted to view the property or go ahead and sign a service agreement. Once that service agreement is signed, we would then invoice the provider for our fee.
That's awesome. And the approach you undertake makes you different in what way, may I ask?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of participant finding services out there that just want to fill vacancies, and there's actually no due diligence done on the providers. So what we can guarantee as a service to participants is that we do a really extensive due diligence internal audit, essentially, before we accept a provider on our books and we accept their vacancies. So in terms of being different and that point of difference from other client finding services is that we can absolutely guarantee that to our participants that the providers we're linking them up with are registered. They have no outstanding cases with the Quality and Safeguards Commissions. Their audits are up to date. All their policies and procedures are thorough and up to date. And these providers are in it for the right reasons.
Gotcha. So for the right reasons often means there's challenges in this advocacy work you do here. What are the common challenges that participants and families face when they're working with the organisation?
So I think a lot of the times some families that come to us, their biggest, barrier to finding the right home and support services is funding. So part of what we do as well is we're happy to work with support coordinators and support them through that review process, whether that's if we have a house that actually is perfect for this participant, we will provide evidence and a supporting letter for that review request to say, well, look, this is the small gap between what that participant's funded for and what they need to move into this property. These are all the reasons why it's right. And if you don't fund this is where they're going to end up. And the likelihood of them being readmitted to hospital or that support falling apart is actually incredibly high. A lot of times having that extra backing with a plan review really helps get things over the line. So I think prior to, engaging with us and coming on board with us, that's what a lot of the frustrations come from with families.
You mentioned earlier that you specialise in your background with complex needs as a support coordinator. What does the term complex needs mean for our listeners to understand, please?
Complex is a spectrum in terms of the type of complexity. So you can have housing complexity, you can have behavioural complexities, there's medical complexities, and sometimes social justice complexities. So with that, when we say complexity, we often mean that there's a whole extra few layers of things that need to be considered for that person when we're looking at their home and living supports. That might be that, someone who's just aged out of child protection, for example, they're 18, child protection's no longer supporting them. They have no family support. Therefore, you have state trustees involved. You have the Office of the Public Advocate involved in terms of their home and living supports and decision making. So it's not just the participant that you have to engage with. It's all of these external government agencies that play a part in that participant's care team. And that can make it quite complex. And it actually does slow things down because you have to make sure that you get everything signed off by the right people. And a lot of times, if that doesn't happen in the way that it needs to, you run into a lot of issues down the track.
Awesome. In your line of work, is there many challenges you have to go through and overcome in the ecosystem of the NDIS?
Oh, all the time. It's never ending. I think sometimes the biggest challenge, though, is as a support coordinator when, things just aren't aligning in terms of funding for a participant. They've maybe been engaged with the SIL provider for a year or two, and then suddenly their SIL funding is cut. And then therefore that's a big loss to that provider. So having to navigate through that and then support the provider to put together some evidence so that we can review that. It's challenging having to be the bearer of bad news as a support coordinator. So, it's not always easy to have to share outcomes from the agency that, we haven't really had anything to do with. We're just the messenger.
When you see funding being cut of a person's plan, what reasons does the agency have for cutting their plan other than not spending it? What other reasons?
Yeah. So there's obviously the, you don't use it, you lose it term that is thrown around a lot. But sometimes the reason the funding can be cut is due to allied health reports not being fully reflective of that participant's capacity. So let's say they are really reliant on one-on-one supports every day, but they've actually put in the report that there are times where they can be left alone. So therefore the funding is reduced. Any little sentence, it can be a few words, the NDIS will grasp onto, and that's part of the evidence. So they have to make that decision. The other time that the funding can be cut is, someone has not read the reports or given, enough time to completely understand the participant's support needs, which, is challenging. But if you do have the evidence and you're submitting everything you have in terms of reports, incident reports, behaviour support plans, risk assessments, you're quite likely going to get a good outcome. But there are times when those things aren't submitted, then unfortunately the agency have to go by the evidence that they've been given. And if there's no evidence given, they have to make some really hard decisions.
Yes, the press was on to the last few weeks when the absent CEO mentioned a few months ago that even their staff don't read all the reports. And everyone's wondering, why do spend all this money on reports to give back to the agency when they're not even being read at all? Well, it's weird, I guess, yeah. So what do you need from providers to make the matching successful, the process of matching successfully? I would assume funding, number one. Number two would be a need for housing. So what do they, other than those basic generic reasons why, what do you need from the provider itself then?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any provider who is willing to engage with us or needing to engage with us to fill a vacancy, someone who's able to take direction, someone who's able to put the participant first and the client first. We really are very person-centered approach at the right fit. And honestly, I am a really big believer in providers who, if we put a client forward to them and they know in their heart of hearts that maybe their client is not going to be the right fit for their house or their supports, to actually say so and say, you know what, this actually isn't going to work for whatever reason. I would much rather us not place a participant into a home or with services that aren't going to work than put them in and then have it all fall apart within sort of 3 or 4 months.
That would be a waste of time and money if that happened, didn't it?
Yeah, for everyone. And again, so unsettling for that participant. So I think having a provider that's, willing to work with us and collaborate is what we need in terms of their, the due diligence checks that we do. We obviously just want you to be transparent and share with us, your registration details and your policies and procedures and just a little bit about the services that you offer. And from there, we can really get the ball rolling.
Jess, as a person in the industry, it's easier for you to be able to vet, do due diligence on providers and whatnot. But to the average family out there who has a child who's disabled, looking for housing or supports, it must be very hard for those people, participants and families, to really vet and know if the provider is the right provider for their child, isn't it?
100%. I think if you have never had to engage in disability support services before, or, you're new to the NDIS, it is all very, very daunting. So part of our service as well is, we're able to work with families and give them, I guess, a bit of a guide of what they need to look out for. If they choose not to go with any of our providers, we obviously want to see them go ahead and find the right fit elsewhere if that's what it takes. So things to really look out for is asking the provider questions around how they would respond or act in certain situations that you think could potentially happen with your child or, your family member that's receiving these services. And their responses are going to be quite telling. So, in the event of my family member becoming quite sick, what would you do? How soon are they going to notify you? How are they going to care for that family member? In terms of housing, you want to make sure if something was broken in the home, what's your process on getting it fixed? As an SDA provider, it's your responsibility to ensure the maintenance is up to date. All of those things, the questions that, we're obviously going to be asking as part of our vetting, but they're things that as a family you can sort of start to ask the provider just to make sure that they are going to be the right fit for you and they are going to do the right thing by your family member.
Yep. So in the NDIS, everyone throws the words choice control everywhere, left, right, and centre. I think it's used too loosely. How do you, as a business, ensure that the participants' voice is central to the whole process of what they need and then their choice in control, I guess, yeah.
So with the right fit, it is very participant-led. So essentially a match won't happen until a participant signs that service agreement, until they've met that provider, until they've seen the house, until they, have potentially, if that person wants to do a meet and greet with potential support workers from one of our providers before they sign a service agreement, we will obviously make that happen. Anything to ensure that that participant feels that, they're confident in the decision that they're making. It is a really big decision to select a SIL provider and an SDA provider because it's your home and living. It's what the people that you're going to be dealing with every single day. So you want to make sure that it's right. We don't want to rush any of that. So, we just want to hold the hands of participants and their families in that decision and provide them with any reassurance or, any process that will make them feel comfortable in the decision that they are making.
Awesome. Impact stories. I want to hear from you some stories in your line of work that makes it fulfilling to you, giving us more insight as to how it all works with the right impact, the right fit, sorry. What's a recent example that you have that highlights the value of your organisation and its values then?
Yeah, 100%. So I had a participant who was in hospital for quite a long period of time. They'd had multiple strokes. Prior to their strokes, they were fiercely independent kindergarten teacher and they were a single mum. They had a 6-year-old son and, unfortunately the result of these strokes was that they were now non-verbal, non-ambulant and required 24/7 2-to-1 care, so 2 carers to 1 participant. And this person was in their 30s and her parents felt that she would be, it was age appropriate for her to live on her own. She shouldn't be living in, a group home setting because prior to her disability, she was living on her own with her son. So their goal and their preference for their daughter was that she lived independently with support and that the home was friendly enough for their son or her son when she visited. So the NDIS made a decision to fund this person a house, a high physical support house with 3 residents. And obviously the family were devastated because that's not how they saw their daughter coming out of hospital. So we received a referral from the support coordinator asking, how can we help? So we obviously guided that support coordinator with the review process on how that home and living decision could be reviewed and how they could consider a apartment or a villa or a townhouse for this young lady. Part of the request the evidence that we submitted from the right fit was that we actually had a 1-person villa vacancy and it had a beautiful courtyard and it was in the suburb of where her parents lived. So we put that in with part of our evidence to say, this is actually what we have available. this is the funding gap. I think it was less than $10,000. Could you please fund, I think it was $8,500 extra into the SDA budget so that this participant can reside here. This is where her family want her to live. It has a courtyard, which would be perfect for us to set up a swing set for her son when he visits. And look, we submitted and we waited and we crossed everything and we actually got the outcome that we wanted. So this young lady's now been discharged from hospital after 18 months in hospital.
Wow,
she's
that's a long time.
Having an amazing time in her single occupancy villa, and she's got an amazing SEAL team. They're often sending me photos of them painting their nails together and having girly nights with face masks. And we organised a swing set in the courtyard for her little boy. So that story, that was one of our first matches, and it's gives you goosebumps when you see the outcome of all that hard work and all that advocacy all come together. It just makes everything worth it.
It does. And have you had much awesome feedback from families?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of families find even just searching for housing quite daunting. There's things like Housing Hub and Go Nest, but sometimes as a family, you just don't even know what you're looking at or what you're reading, and all the terminology that's used in, the little bio about each house can be really confusing and confronting. So at the right fit, we're able to present options to families that are simplified and perfect for the everyday person to understand exactly what they're looking at. So yeah, that's the kind of feedback that we love hearing, knowing that we're able to simplify and take, the fear and the stress out of searching for disability accommodation.
What's Housing Hub? Do you get asked by SEAL providers or support coordinators or families?
I don't get asked. I usually get asked by families what Housing Hub is. The easiest way to describe it is it's like realestate.com, but for disability housing. That's how I've always explained it to clients. I think it's a great initiative and a great starting point, but it's tricky because there's that, or there's Go Nest, and then there's not really anywhere else for providers to advertise their vacancies. So it makes it hard.
It does. It does. Future vision. What's next for the Right Fit? Are there new services or partnerships you're looking at doing in the future?
So I have partnered with a small group of like-minded professionals called the SIL Circle. So we actually all individually work within the disability sector, and a lot of us in the sort of SIL and SDA space. Part of that partnership is that if for whatever reason I have a participant that comes to me and I can't find a vacancy for them, I sort of put it to the circle and say, hey, I've got this person, this is what they're looking for, these are their preference. Does anyone have anything or have seen anything that might match what this person is looking for? So it's really just a collaboration of like-minded professionals doing the good work, trying to problem solve for our NDIS participants.
The SIL Circle, hey? Can I Google that or what?
Yeah, check them out on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I think the other sort of part of the Right Fit that we are hoping to expand to is an education piece. I'm really passionate about education. I'm really passionate about upskilling people in the sector, not only disability, but healthcare as well, because a lot of the times healthcare and disability go hand in hand, but the two sectors don't always talk or speak the same language or talk to one another. So I have a really big vision of being able to provide really robust education to hospitals and aged care facilities to understand the NDIS a little bit better, understand housing and SIL, so that we can see much better outcomes for NDIS participants coming out of hospital. A lot of times they're rushed out, they're discharged within, 5 days, and there's no time for that participant to weigh up their options. And this is where they're going to live. This is not, a short-term accommodation option. It's long-term. And I feel as though if we're looking for a rental, we'll want to see the house maybe once or twice before we make the decision, before we sign the lease agreement. You want to do the same thing for an NDIS participant. They're no different to you and I. They deserve that. That's their right. So I think part of that education piece to social workers, hospital discharge planners, to understand that sometimes the time frame is not realistic and it's actually not fair on the participant. So just give us an extra week, give us an extra 2 weeks so that we can make sure that that participant's really happy, that provider knows exactly what sort of support needs this person has so that they can prepare their team, they can train their team and make sure that, the team is given the chance to thrive and deliver really amazing supports for that person.
Awesome. I reckon one day in the foreseeable months, you and Debbie should do a webinar on hospital discharge.
Yeah.
Participants going into the hospital, what happens in the hospital system, the challenge of being discharged, how many hoops have to jump through to get the discharge happening. That'll be a very good topic to cover in a 1 hour webinar by Debbie and you talking about this process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. I want to ask you a question now. This is probably a prelude for our next podcast in the future. If you could improve one thing in the current SIL or SDA landscape for housing, what would that be? And don't feel like just a little 1 minute answer should be fine. We'll cover this some other time in a detailed session, but give me your thoughts, please. A little teaser.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I wish could change in the SIL landscape, I'll do SDA next, but SIL landscape, I really want to see a shift in the mindset of providers, that there should not be a $ attached to an NDIS participant. It should be, do you have the staff to support this person, yes or no? Don't ask me how much funding they have. I wouldn't, give them to you if I didn't think that you'd be able to provide the support.
Hey, I'm on a
do
podcast.
You have staff
I'll call you back
that can support this participant, yes or no? Then we can talk funding later. Really grinds my gears when I see a lot of people come into the sector and want to become an NDIS provider and they have $ in their eyes. This is not the place to make money. This is the place to do really amazing work and change people's lives. So I think it's a real privilege to work in this space and have such an impact on people when they're in their most vulnerable state. So I just want to keep working with like-minded people who see that as the same way that I do. In terms of SDA, I would love to see a shift in where investors are choosing to build. I think it's amazing. If you're investing in SDA, you obviously are a great person. You could invest in any kind of real estate if you wanted to, but you're choosing to invest in a type of property that's going to really help someone that's very disadvantaged. And I think that's brilliant. Have a think about if you tomorrow were to have a stroke and you have a brain injury and you need to live in SDA, where would you want to live? Would you want to live an hour and a half out of the city, away from your family, away from everything you know? Or would you want to live in the inner suburbs? Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more. You're going to have to invest more. But I can guarantee that if you build closer in, you'll fill that vacancy straight away. But if you build further out and you don't want to pay the money, that house is going to sit empty for a really, really long time.
Can I give you thank you so much for that feedback. I agree with you. I want to give you my measuring stick of middle, inner, outer suburbs. And you tell me whether this is a good gauge.
Yes.
This is a gauge, right? In that really outer suburbs, the tendency is either 0 or 1. Okay. Middle ring, I think it's either 1 or 2. Inner ring, 2, maybe 3. So that's how I gauge the outer, middle, and inner. Do you agree with that kind of litmus test benchmark there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because inner ring wouldn't be 0 or 1. It'd be filled up.
Oh, 100%. Straight away. You'd have it filled before it's even finished being built. I guarantee you. Yeah, a lot of the providers that I'm working with have made the mistake of building way too far out. And they're struggling now to fill those vacancies. And they're beautiful homes, don't get me wrong. But when you've recently acquired a disability, you want to be close to your support system. And if your support system are inner suburbs and you've lived in the inner suburbs your entire life, and you won't want to be moving that far away.
Yep. Well, thank you for confirming what I already knew. Thank you. Now, listen, as we wrap up this session, how do SIL providers, support coordinators or families, how can they reach out to you? What's your website? What's your 1300 if there is a number? How do they get to you, please?
Yeah, 100%. So my email is therightfitau@gmail.com. I have a SIL resource that I've developed. I'm planning on putting a few more resources up on my small little website that I've got. It is called ndiswithjess.com. And otherwise, I'm happy to share my mobile number, which will, my work phone, which will,
How
that with me.
The website? The website should be fine. The email there. What about your website?
Yeah, the website is www.ndiswithjess.com.
Awesome. So last question to you before you finish for the day. What's your one piece of advice you'd like to give to families or support coordinators navigating this housing journey? And obviously, the housing journey can be still home, ILO, SDA, whatever it may be. The reality is we know how hard it is in the world of Australian affordability and housing crisis, that it's hard to get properties to live in as a normal family, as an individual. But in the disability world, it kind of is so much more harder because it's few and far between. So what is your advice on anyone in that world looking on their housing journey, please?
Yeah, well, collaboration is key. Don't feel that you have to do it all on your own. Definitely make sure that you've got a good team around you. So whether that's allied health, OTs are incredible in terms of checking houses out to make sure that the accessibility features meet that client's needs. Reach out to your support coordinator, provide them as much information and detail as you can in what it is you're looking for in your housing and supports, because that really does help them in narrowing down that search for you. And look, as a support coordinator, again, collaborate, delegate tasks to, sort of within the care team so that you're not having to do it all on your own, because it is a really big job. And if you do get stuck, just reach out to us. We're here to help.
Awesome. Jess, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to interviewing again for our next topic down the track. I'm sure it'll be awesome to talk about, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.
Thanks, Min.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.